Hello and welcome to this extra, bonus, emergency, call it what you want episode of the Total Saints podcast. We're the weekly pod that goes to the heart of all things Southampton Football Club, and that includes managerial changes. Just like last night, we're once again live streaming this on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. If you're watching along, then please do leave your questions or comments as we go. I'm delighted to say that with as little interest in Monday night television as myself, a couple of the TSP chaps have joined me this evening. Glenn de la Cour is still the creative mind behind the League One -10 blog, and Jacob Tanswell is still the dedicated Southampton FC reporter for The Athletic. Whilst we're going to get straight into this, I'm assuming we're calling it a Nathan Jones special. As always, I must first pass on our thanks to the fabulous global TSP patrons who underpin everything we do. A short intro tonight. This is episode 213A, let's call it that, of the Total Saints podcast. News broke at 10 a.m. this morning. Sadly, I think we have to say in part that Ralph Hasenhüttl had been removed from his post as Saints manager after the 4-1 defeat to Newcastle on Sunday. Jacob, before we get going on to chat about a gentleman that's seemingly waiting in the wings to take over, you weren't on the pod last night, so your brief reflections on Ralph's time at Saints and the club's eventual decision to terminate his contract?
Yeah, I feel quite strongly on this. I was lucky enough to go to the games during lockdown, so the back end of the 2019-2020 season and overlap into the next. And for me, as speaking from a fan's point of view, I think it gave purpose to what I was watching. I'd become a little bit disillusioned under Pellegrino, Puel, Mark Hughes, and having this man walk in, basically carrying all the burden of Shane Gow's mistakes, being a one-man band in some ways. And being a guy that will go to toe with any club in the Premier League, regardless of their quality, and bloodying their noses and winning games. And he was so passionate. I loved it. And he's probably one of my favourite, if not my favourite ever Southampton manager. I know a lot more have been more successful than him, or have been seen to be more successful than him. But what he did with that group of players, so technically lacking in quality, and turn them into a team that Southampton fans could be proud of, was quite unbelievable, to be honest with you. So it is really sad to see him go. I've always been a big admirer of him, contrary to what some people think. But I just felt possibly in the last couple of months, it's just come to an end of the road, really. There should be no blame on either part. It just happens, and when it comes to an end, things are going to end fractures and things like that. But it's really important to know, and we'd never overlook what an achievement he's done. He's done an incredible job, and he should look back on it with fondness, and should always be welcomed back by supporters and the club, which I'm sure he will.
Yeah, well said, Jacob. And I think just to sort of finish on Ralph, I know from my own personal experience, a bit like yourself, had the opportunity to meet him and interview him a couple of times. I'm not a professional journalist. I couldn't have asked any more of him in terms of being welcoming and treating me with respect and answering my questions like a journalist almost. So I think certainly, whilst the writing's been on the wall for a little while, I think it's absolutely I think understandable to still feel an element of sadness. I can see some comments already coming in. David Baker, thanks Ralph, but it was time. And Philip Cook, I feel bad for Ralph, a good man, and gave us some highs. And during tough times with little investment, he lost his way and his identity. Good luck to him, but it's time for a change. Glenn, let's move on. As is often the case in football, clubs rarely sack a manager these days unless they've got someone pretty much ready to go, warmed up in the background. Nathan Jones, currently at Luton Town, appears to be that man. According to most media outlets, the deal's pretty much done, and announcement can be potentially expected over the next couple of days. So what's your overall thoughts and reaction to the news of his impending arrival?
Well, first off, I'll say until this morning when his name came up, I didn't really know much about him at all. Done a bit of reading up since then. So I kind of know the headlines that, good at Luton, bad at Stoke, done well again once he's gone back to Luton. So it concerns me slightly on the face of it that he's only really been successful at in one environment at one club. Because, Martin Semmens has always said that there was a list in the background for the day that that Ralph was to go, whenever that was. So you'd like to think that this has been well thought out and well planned, and we as supporters, I think, are going to have to, trust that the due diligence has been done, and this guy will be able to hit the ground running, because he has to. Because if he takes, and it's a massive step up from the Championship to the Premier League, so he's got to do reasonably well in his first 10 games. Otherwise, we are going to be in serious trouble. And I know that spans sort of now and after the World Cup, but we can't afford to have him 15, 20 games acclimatizing, because we'll be dead in the water before then. So it's a big ask for him to come in and do the job. The fact that he's not managed at the top level in England or in any other country, it's another risk, I guess. If you look at, Wolves have just appointed a very senior manager from Spain, and Lopetegui. You've had other managers come in, Emery at Villa, experience all over the place. So we're again ploughing our own furrow with regard to, we're trying to find a gem in the rough, or whatever the phrase is, and hope that it works. So it's going to be interesting. I'm not saying we should have gone for a big name. Steven Gerrard was a big name. That didn't work. But I can't help but think, if I'd had time to draw up a wish list, I think I'd have hoped for someone who had a bit more experience in at the top level. But this is the route we're going down, and we do have to trust the people, Martin Semmens, Rasmus Ankersen, that they've got this right.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Jacob, look, I know it's hard when, you got a foot in both camps. You're a journalist, you got to do your job, you got to break the stories. I think, I saw some grumbles around the story last night that they were going to let Ralph go. I've seen some grumbles around breaking news today around Nathan Jones and things like that. So, likewise, you're a Saints fan as well. So you see it from our perspective. And I think it's important that, people listening, watching, fans, etc., kind of relate to that as well. So, kind of tell us how your morning unfolded, how you kind of gone through this process. And I suppose at time of recording, it's Monday night, what the current situation is. And again, your overall thoughts on Saints moving for Nathan Jones.
Yeah, so we're always well aware that the World Cup would be the ample time, ideally, for the club to make a change. I don't think that was, that wasn't hidden. It was, the change was going to be made anyway. But I was hearing before even the game started, regardless of the result, that Arsenal, it might be his last game. So throughout the game, you just keep contacts, messages, and then when it's a 4-1 defeat, regardless of the XG and how well you Southampton thought they played, on the scoreline it's 4-1. So I felt the change would be accelerated then. Of course, you have the press conference afterwards, which I had to ask the first couple of questions, and it was never nice. Asking a man if does he think he's lost his job is not great. But we had to run the story on him going to be sacked. We weren't sure whether it would be tomorrow or today now or next week during the World Cup break, but we had to do it, because if I didn't, then I wouldn't be a journalist, especially if sitting on something that big. This morning I always had that inkling that it would be this morning, even 9 or 10 o'clock. So I've just been monitoring it from 6:30 this morning till the announcement. Yeah, exactly. And then just being on the phone and on the laptop all day and trying to find out what's the latest. And Nathan Jones got mentioned about 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning, and like you probably were, I was a little bit surprised. But then you get your head around it and you start speaking to people, and a lot of people do think it's got a good move. So hopefully it works. And he's certainly passionate, man.
Yeah, I can see a few comments coming in. Ellie saying completely unexpected direction to go in. I don't think a single fan would have ever predicted our interest to be Nathan Jones. So I think that's kind of reiterating what you've just said there. Look, I saw a quote, and Glenn was just alluding to it there, Jacob, earlier on, stating that Rasmus Ankersen had very much behind the move for Nathan Jones, that the club wanted a head coach who was capable of developing young talent and also be able to give Saints the momentum to survive in the Premier League. So, we know, as Glenn said, that they constantly analyse players, they constantly analyse coaches and managers and things like that. But the fact that they've moved so swiftly would indicate that this is absolutely the person that they believe is the right, Sport Republic believe is the right person to take the team and the club forward.
Yeah, they've been monitoring, managers for so long, even like Glenn alluded to about what Martin Semmens said about keeping track of managers. And we reported a month or so ago that they were maintaining relationships with managers. So this has been long in the planning. This is not just a off the cuff decision. They've liked Nathan Jones, they like what he stands for, and you've got to trust Rasmus and Martin and whoever else is involved, Matt Crocker, for example. These guys are highly intelligent football men, and they know and they believe that Nathan Jones is the right man. They probably understand the fan opinion and they see it as a risk, but they've got deeper convictions than that. So, I see it as a risk, but the profile of squad Southampton have got, I think it probably suits a character like Nathan Jones. It might not be the most entertaining, might not be on the front foot, but to say they're a direct team, I think it's a little bit of nonsense, because if you look at all the metrics, they're not. I think they're middle of the table for long balls completed or long balls attempted. So they basically do everything, but not one thing very, very well. They're more of a well-rounded team, Luton. So I think that will probably suit Southampton and where they are at the moment.
Yeah, Glenn, there's a lot of more experienced Premier League managers out there, as you quite rightly said. I can see Sean Dyche popping up in the comments and things like that as well. There'll be lots of fans that say, do you know what? I don't want Sean Dyche football. I don't want that sort of battering and direct football. I want someone that can maybe bring an element of uncertainty, in terms of teams won't know what to expect, and maybe that sort of approach of moving forward with a sort of young, vibrant. I mean, he's only 46; he's still fairly young. I say that as a 41-year-old, I can say that. But are you surprised, that they've gone down the route of a Nathan Jones and not someone like a Sean Dyche or something like that?
No, not surprised at all. When you look at the summer recruitment and the fact that it was young player after young player after young player coming in, and at various points in the summer, I was looking at the sort of makeup of the squad, thinking we need to sign a couple of experienced boys here, and then we sold Oriol Romeu. So we were obviously doubling down on that strategy of going for, young, unpolished, players. So it shouldn't really surprise you that they've tried to do the same thing with the manager. Personally, I wouldn't have done it, but it's not up to me. That's the decision they make, and they'll stand or fall by it. I mean, from what I've read about Nathan Jones and his tactics, admittedly, this was an article about last season. It did say that there was quite a lot of hitting the striker early, which is the polite way of saying Sean Dyche football. But it mentioned about pressing high and counter attacks from deep. Now, a manager can have tactics at one particular club. You don't know whether that's the way he wants to play or that's what he's settled on because that's the players he's got at that particular club. I mean, if you look at Saints now, we haven't really got a target man. Che Adams does a half decent job of that, but we haven't really got a target man, and we haven't really got the pace to attack from deep. So if the blueprint he used for Luton last year is what he's going to try and do with us, you do wonder how that's going to work. I mean, when Ralph came in, he didn't bring in the high press Leipzig thing straight away because he needed to make sure the players bought into it and that they were capable of doing it. So it is going to be interesting. Hopefully, we've got the we found the next Graham Potter who's loitering around in the lower leagues, and hopefully we found the next Graham Potter and not the next Paul Sturrock.
And it's interesting you said that. I mean, just while you were talking there, I was trying to think, Eddie Howe, Brendan Rodgers, Graham Potter, all managers that are doing well to a certain extent in the Premier League, peaks and troughs obviously, but have come up through, kind of done their grounding and their sort of early work in the Championship. So it proves that it can be done if you've got that right sort of support and that structure and infrastructure behind you.
It's just, I'm not sure that with the club being where it is at the moment in terms of the first team, that it's the right time to do it now. I mean, Brendan Rodgers got promoted, didn't he, into the Premier League with Swansea, and then moved on. So that's sort of like one example. So, everyone's got to start somewhere. And I mean, we talk about Graham Potter. He's been catapulted into the Chelsea job. He's come from a lower level, if you like, at Brighton, and he's gone into the Chelsea job now, managing a massive club. That is a similar kind of appointment in a way. It's a manager who's not been at that sort of level, and now he's gone up a level, and this will be the same for Nathan Jones. And we've just got to hope he swims rather than sinks.
Yeah, Jacob. For every Saints fan that's saying he got Luton from 15th in League Two to the Championship playoffs in his first stint at the Hatters, others will say he got sacked from Stoke City after winning 6 games out of 38. Some will indicate, as we just said, that he's a young British manager, arguably deserves a chance in the Premier League. Others will probably say it's not a very ambitious appointment. So I think the key thing probably, and I suppose the question here is, without even a bib being issued and some instructions shouted on the training ground, it's a bit naive probably to judge him either way at this time, isn't it?
It is, but I can completely see everyone's points of view, because Nathan Jones might not be the most glamorous appointment, but it's on the flip side of the coin is that he's he deserves it, really. I know he had that spell at Stoke, but I think if you speak to a lot of people, there was a number of mitigating factors for that. Stoke were dysfunctional at the time, didn't really have any guidance, and you got to remember now he's come in probably solely as a head coach with a lot of support around him, through Rasmus, through Matt Crocker, through Martin Semmens. So it's going to help. Important things to know is that he can speak Spanish, so you'd like to think that a relationship with Ruben Selles will be struck fairly quickly. Very personal with players. A lot of players really like him. Luton players like him, and for a team that's been a little bit fractured recently, with the manager that it's not the warmest. I think that could be refreshing, and he gives everything. He only plays players who have total buy-in. So I think for the first couple of weeks, I think it's going to be a real shock to some of those players. Having just a different voice, I think that's always good. Having a different voice leading the group, and you see him knee sliding sometimes at Kenilworth Road. I would absolutely love to see that at St Mary. So hopefully he can galvanise the group very, very quickly. And Southampton only has to go on one big run of form to stay up, and hopefully that can be soon, and after the World Cup, even after with Nathan Jones.
Yeah, I think if we scored 2 goals in a game, we should all be doing knee slides, really, shouldn't we? So, Glenn, look, I mean, Jacob, I think he did this last week, actually. I'm sure he's reading my notes here. But I had, obviously the squad, we feel, do need a bit of a refresh of energy and belief after the last few months. I wrote down here, a new voice, etc. So, how do you think the players are going to react to this? Because they need to.
They certainly do. And that's another risk of taking a manager from the lower league. I mean, I don't think we've got the kind of players who are just going to not listen simply because he's not, at this point, a top manager. So I don't think that'll be a problem. I mean, with the transfer window coming up, he's not going to attract players on his name of the quality that we need, like Ronald Koeman did, for example. That's not going to happen. But that's not what we're looking to do anyway. The recruitment is handled by other people. It will be interesting to see, what happens in the transfer window. I mean, we all know we need a striker and probably another creative player. So it would have been interesting to see if he'd had the last 5 games. Obviously, you can't turn the clock back, to see if he could have got more of a tune out of this squad. And I think that was the problem with Ralph in the end. I think many people could possibly have the opinion that other managers could do better with this set of players now. But you would think that after we're led to believe he's going to be in charge of the Liverpool game, which is obviously a bit of a free hit. But the games coming up after Christmas, it'll be interesting to see sort of like what he does, and then obviously we'll all be looking at new players coming in.
I can see Sonny's here said he can bring Cameron Jerome with him, baller. So there's an option, but yeah,
he's not as old as me, isn't he?
I can see a couple of other comments here. Mike Byers, listening to radio today, Luton fan came on. Nathan Jones likes working with youngsters, so that's obviously important. Stuart Dunn, he's a good coach and has done a really good job taking Luton from League 2 obscurity to the Championship playoffs on next to no budget. It's a big step up, which is risky, but I'm interested to see where it goes. And then Mansfield said, people moan about potential long ball football, but the way we've been playing this season, we've pretty much been playing that, which I know you've spoken about several times, Jacob. But look, I mean, if he does move to the South Coast, then he'll be leaving Luton. I mean, they're playing Tuesday night, I think, from what you were saying just before we came on air. Every chance that he's still going to be in charge of that game. But, they're currently just outside the playoffs, 29 points from 19 games, including 7 wins. They've only lost 4 times, which is the second lowest joint in the Championship. So a lot of draws in there. But, I suppose the key thing for him, as we found out, and we've always spoken about before, that plan A, that plan B, that plan C, that's part of working in the Premier League as a manager. You can't just play one style of football. He's going to need to learn and adapt, as Glenn said, pretty quickly, because there's some big games coming up just after Christmas.
I watched a lot of Luton last year, covering Bournemouth, and I remember going to Kenilworth Road, and Luton won 3-2 against Bournemouth. And Bournemouth have technically better players. Everyone knows that. Luton, probably one of the worst teams if you look on paper in the Championship. But what I found is that I just sensed that he was adapting the game to suit the team he had. And I think that's a mark of a really good manager. He knew Bournemouth were weak physically in the air, so he didn't try and be technically clever or pass on the floor. Kenilworth Road, nice and compact. It's not a very good pitch. He went long. and I'm interested to see what he does at St Mary's. I think at times he'll probably go long, but I don't think he'll be as staunch in his principles or as wedded to his principles that Ralph was, because there was a time, wasn't it, where everyone said he did have a plan B, and you look this season, he changed formation 4 times in 7 games, so he had plan C, D, E. So I do think Nathan Jones will adapt, but the framework will be hard work, aggressive, and getting into teams' faces like he often gets into fourth official faces, which again I'm very interested to see.
Well, we've spoken a lot, haven't we, over the years about Saints being quite an honest club, and maybe just being a bit too nice on the pitch and things like that. And I'm not saying he needs to turn them into a bunch of moany old gits and stuff like that, but it's again finding that balance, Jacob, between Saints, sort of fighting their corner a little bit more, maybe.
Yeah, you remember Crystal Palace away that midweek a couple of years back where Ward-Prowse and the rest of the players roughed up Wilfried Zaha, and I just thought that was Southampton getting, being street smart, street wise, and being that horrible team. And I think if Nathan Jones can do that, they're going to get points, because a lot of these games this year, they've been very tight, haven't they? There's not been many goals in it. And if Southampton were just a little bit more ruthless, if they made that foul on a counter attack and got that yellow card, small things and small details like that, could be the difference between a defeat, a draw, or a draw and a win. And that could have kept Ralph Hasenhüttl to win a job until the World Cup. So I do think they need those fine margins to go with them, and being more aggressive will certainly do that.
Yeah, and just focusing on him, as we said, Glenn, I mean, obviously, age aside, I mean, he has managed well over 300 games in the Football League, so he's got that experience. He was also Championship Manager of the season, I think, if my research, which was hastily put together, is right, 2021-22 last season. So he's got something about him that, there's credentials there, alongside the fact that he's obviously done well with, young developing teams.
Oh yeah, it's not like we're appointing someone here who's come from absolutely nowhere, who's just been a League Two player or something like that, and he's never managed a team in his life. I mean, you'd like to think, with that experience that he's got, and with the relative success that he's had with Luton, and probably the lessons that he learned at Stoke, because you do learn a lot when things are rubbish, and especially when there's loads of mitigating factors. So hopefully all this has gone in to make a nice rounded managerial candidate for the job, and he comes in and uses all that and does a good job. But there are a lot of pieces that need to fall into place for this to be a success. But I feel like I'm being very negative about it. What I'm not trying to be, that tends to be my personality a little bit. I tend to see potential problems.
It's just a bit, we're all a bit unsure, aren't we? I mean, it's come out of total left field. I think all of us, I speak for myself. I mean, I was staggered when I saw Jacob's tweet this morning. I was like, literally, no disrespect to Nathan Jones, I was like, I can't believe that's the channel we're going down. But as someone said earlier, we have to trust Rasmus, we have to trust Sport Republic, we have to give him a chance.
Yeah, indeed. And and it's I think we all like to think that we know what we're talking about, and we all like to think that we could do better, or we know someone who could do better. I mean, so one of my mates said to me, "What about Ruud van Nistelrooy?" And I thought, yeah, that would be fantastic.
But bring Cody Gakpo with him as well.
Absolutely. but that would have been like the Ronald Koeman appointment, and when unfortunately, I think it's unfortunately, we're not that club. We're not that club anymore. So we're not going to be doing that sort of thing. So. Yeah. The more I think about it, this is more of an expected type of appointment. But I have to say, when I saw the name this morning, I was sort of quite staggered. But then I didn't really know what I expected. We haven't changed manager for 4 years, and bearing in mind the 3 we had before Ralph were all varying degrees of garbage. So so hopefully we've got this one right.
Totally. I've got to say, though, the point that you made, Jacob, about him speaking Spanish, I obviously saw that he played in Spain. I mean, that's something that hadn't even crossed my mind. So that link between him and Ruben Sellers will be really interesting. And I was thinking earlier, you mentioned about that, Glenn, but I was thinking to myself, we always used to talk about players, didn't we? Could they do it in Stoke on a cold Tuesday night? Well, we're going to find out tomorrow night if he can do it with Luton, aren't we? In Stoke on a cold Tuesday night. But I saw Stuart said here, Stoke haven't gone anywhere since he left. So maybe it wasn't all down to him. So that's an interesting point as well. But look, just to wrap up, because this is a bit of a shorter pod, hastily put together, as you said, to try and I can see a few thank yous to us guys for doing it, which is very much appreciated. But Jacob, look, if things do go to plan, then he's likely to be confirmed during the next sort of 48 to 72 hours and subject to confirmation. I mean, are we literally expecting to see him in the dugout at Liverpool, or is it going to be that sort of, I'll tell you what, let's ease him in gently, he's going to be in the stand watching, that sort of type of scenario?
That's a little bit unclear. From what I hear from his character, he likes to be that aggressive lead from the front. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the dugout getting amongst it. And I think it's probably a perfect type of game for him, isn't it? Because I know Glenn's alluded to it for a long time in terms of Liverpool. They're gonna have a lot of players going to the World Cup. So if Nathan Jones wants to be in there with his tracksuit on, getting in the full officials' ear,
Throwing teacups, yeah.
Lianco captaining the side, and everyone following him. I think that'll be really entertaining watch. I'm going up on the coach with the fans for that game, so
Nice.
Looking forward to it. And if anyone else is going, please get in touch because I'm looking for fan opinion for a piece. So should be a really good game, and hopefully Jones is in the dugout for that one.
Yeah, and if he doesn't win, I'm going to completely write him off.
It's going to be our pod next weekend. Is going to be the bad start and all that sort of thing, isn't it? But Glenn, I mean, we alluded to it earlier on, didn't we? Just to sort of wrap up. I mean, it's not necessarily about Liverpool. He's then got 6 weeks World Cup. From what I'm hearing, Jacob will know and can probably nod on the screen. But it sounds like the Miami, Florida thing is very much on the go. He's going to have some time with the players and get them ready for that sort of Christmas, New Year, January period. Which, as we said, those are the games that are going to define our season. So it's going to be a big opportunity for him now to come in and spend some time getting to know the players and trying to adapt and sort of introduce his ideas.
Yeah, I mean, at the most we're only going to have at most 4 players at the World Cup, isn't it? So yeah, so he gets the ideal opportunity to it's like the lockdown period, isn't it, where we had that time to get ideas for Ralph, in that case, to get his ideas across, and we came back and we hit the ground running, and that's what we need to do this time. So in many ways it's an ideal time, and the Liverpool game, if you like, makes it even more ideal because he gets to have a look at what he's got to before the break. So, but I mean, whether a backs to the wall performance against Liverpool or getting pumped by Liverpool like we normally do, is going to be a great introduction. I don't really know, but no, I mean, I kind of hope he does stick his head above the parapet straight away, and the little bits that Jacob said about his character, I think if it's a possibility, I think he will do that. And if it's down to him, I'm sure he would want to be in the dugout against Liverpool. And I mean, if nothing else, it gives him the experience of going up against like him or hate him, and I hate him. He's one of the biggest and best managers in the Premier League, so it'll be a good thing for him to be there on Saturday.
Indeed. I can see Mansfield agreeing with you, Jacob saying he's probably planning to build the team around Lianco as we speak. Senenguli, first 7 games after Christmas, all against teams around us at the bottom. We'll know whether we're going down after that, February the 12th. Let's hope we're a bit more optimistic than that. Gary Gibbons, absolutely. Sport Republic have forked out £220 million on Saints and surely know their managerial stuff. And I think probably just to end then, Jacob, I want to, as I say, have an element of respect for Ralph here because, it's still quite sore. But from your point of view as a journalist, obviously it's the first change of Saints manager, since you've been in your role. Is it exciting, the sort of opportunity? And as I say, to everyone listening, I mean this very respectfully towards Ralph, but is it exciting to sort of think there's a new manager coming in that you're going to have to, build a relationship with and get to know?
Yeah, definitely. I think, from the last 4 years being a fan and then, asking him questions as a journalist in the last couple of months, I've got to know Ralph, very well in terms of his style, in terms of his personality. And, he's such a fascinating character. And from what you see of Nathan Jones, he is too. I'm sure it's going to come out. I'll be doing a big read on him. He's a devout Christian. He's got tattoos all over his body. He's, there's a lot of interesting facts about him. So even off the field, if we can just do articles or find out a little bit about his personality off it, I think that's really interesting. It's not covering Southampton is never straightforward, is it? And it feels like I've been thrown in a deep end a little bit with the amount of changes that's been happening inside the club. But yeah, it's been fantastic, and hopefully Nathan Jones can be even more entertaining. But at the same time, Hasenhüttl has done an incredible job, and we should just forget about him now. He can have that well-deserved rest, and hopefully he can carry on in management, because I think it will be a poorer place without him, because I think his style of play and what he's been able to do at this club has been excellent. And if he had Sport Republic's funds 2 years earlier, that's where the regrets are for me. I think it would have been really, really good.
Yeah. Well, as someone once said to me, who I won't name names, but said that they were told that reporting on Saints was boring, and I can guarantee, having done a podcast for 5 years, is anything but boring. But there we go. Well, if Nathan Jones does become Saints head coach, then obviously we'll wish him well. I think it's clear we'll all be watching the social media channels and club websites with varying degrees of anticipation over the next couple of days. Anyway, that's it for this week's extra episode. Thank you to all of you for listening and watching, as well as for all your comments. Hopefully we managed to get through most of them. I can see a final one from Stuart said he could be the Welsh Strachan, so we'll have to wait and see if that happens. But if you've enjoyed listening to this, then please be advised that you can find all previous TSP episodes via the main podcasting channels out there: Spotify, iTunes, Podfollow, etc. That includes TSP 213, which was recorded Sunday night just gone, and includes a preview of this week's Carabao Cup tie with Sheffield Wednesday, and also a look ahead to Saturday's trip to Anfield, potentially with Nathan Jones now at the helm. So go give it a listen at the very least. Don't forget that you can also follow Total Saints Podcast on Facebook and Twitter. It's just at Total Saints Pod. A big thanks to Glenn and Jacob. I know Jacob's had a very busy day. I'm sure Glenn has as well. So thanks to both of you for giving up half an hour to come and chat to me. We'll catch you again at 7:15 p.m. UK time next Sunday evening, the 13th of November, on both Facebook and YouTube. So until then, catch you soon.